Maybe you're like me, and when you first heard that there were new Pokemon leaks, your first thought was...
Oh my god! Okay, it's happening! Everybody stay calm!
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm!
But hints as to the potential Pokemon trainers or storyline for Pokemon Legends ZA are not what we got. Instead, we got what people are calling the Tera beta leaks. These are designs for Pokemon that ended up not making it to the final design stages and are called the beta designs. So today I want to take some time to kind of look at those and see what they might look like if they were fully rendered out. And so, as always, and as today, I'm the Thesterninator, but my friends call me Stern, and we're going to be looking at the beta sprites of Pokemon today, and turning them into real Pokemon. Let's get started. First up is Licky Licky. Lickitung has always been one of my favorite Pokemon. I don't know if it's just because it's so weird and out there, or because it kind of gave me some viability, as normal Pokemon can be cool, but regardless, I wanted to evolve into something even cooler, and was kind of disappointed when we got this. So, upon seeing that the beta sprites actually had a different form for Licky Licky, I was ecstatic, and it was the first one that I jumped onto rendering. And while I'm not known on this channel for drawing Pokemon that already exists or already have designs, I wanted to hop into this. Again, Lickitung needed some of the passion that I felt like it deserved, so I was excited, I was ecstatic, I was pumped, and giving it the honor that I felt that one of my favorite, most sought after Pokemon, I was pumped. I can't say that enough. So I went in utilizing the base sprite as a lot of inspiration for the pose, the coloring, all of that. It turned out to be a little bit more difficult than I anticipated. A lot of the issues that I faced with this drawing came down to scale. How big is the head compared to the rest of the body? How big is the body compared to the legs? How big are the legs compared to the arms? And going from there. So I ended up kind of breaking it down, utilizing the grid that came on that first reveal as my guidelines, knowing that the entire body is about 3 heads tall, maybe 4 counting the spikes and legs, and utilizing the fact that the legs were each about the same size as the head, the arms were about the same width as the legs, and kind of mathing my way through this entire system. It was a different way of looking at this concept, maybe one that a lot of other Pokemon artists are already super familiar with. It was something that I very much had to learn because, again, I draw Fakemon. I don't usually draw stuff that has such a strong reference point as a Pokemon that already kind of almost somewhat exists. It fit in this uncanny valley of it kind of exists, but also kind of doesn't, and there are some creative liberties that are allowed and called for to be taken in this design, and other areas where those same creative liberties shouldn't be, because I'm trying to recreate something that exists, which was kind of brand new for me on this. I know that may be shocking to some, but I don't draw a ton of already existing Pokemon because of these type of limitations. I draw Fakemon because there's a certain freedom to it, a freedom that was kind of removed by going about this specific practice. So I went ahead and designed it anyway, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. The other issue came with the fact that this already does have a render is how are you gonna do the highlights? Because that's where you give some definition, and we don't know the definition of this creature. While I kind of started going in believing I knew everything that I needed to know, I ended up finding out that I actually needed to learn a lot and take some inspiration with kind of what the 3-dimensional aspect of this Pokemon would look like. And in the end, we come up with Licky Sticky. I took the name as a reference to the fact that this thing is just a roll of Hubba Bubba gum tape, and went with that. I pictured almost as a third evolution, or maybe a branched evolution to the initial Lickitung type of format. So yeah, here it is. It follows a lot of the same rules for the shiny, and for size comparison, I wanted it to feel big, but not go kind of over into the realm of no longer feeling like a Lickitung style design. I didn't want to make it a dinosaur or a dragon, still the normal type, and the base stats all mimic exactly what Licky Licky's original base stats are. So yeah, let me know in the comments how this could be differentiated, whether that be ability or some other thing. You guys always do such a great job at that, so I'm not gonna step on your toes by taking away the ability that you guys have to make up abilities for the Pokemon in these videos. So yeah, super pumped about it. While I've drawn mutated Pokemon before, in fact, this whole video I'm kind of fitting into our Porico area. You'll find out why in just a little bit about mutated Pokemon. I never anticipated that we would get something as terrifying as this for official art, at least for official beta design art, and that is terrifying. For those of you who aren't aware, this is Cacturn, or what would eventually become Cacturn. A far reach from the Scarecrow that we know and love today, but very fun. It reminds me a lot of Sporovine, which was our mutated Carnivine type of Pokemon. So yeah, it kind of fit right in the niche that I go for with these videos. So let's hop into turning this into a Pokemon. With this design, I had a lot to work with. It was already pretty much fully rendered, just not in the Pokemon style. So it kind of went back to some of the videos that I did early on in this channel when I kind of brought it back to life, was doing our Elden Ring bosses as Pokemon, where you actually pared down what was already existing, and that feels a lot easier. So I went in, created kind of the base shape that I knew we had to match, even gave it kind of the pose that I wanted, and just went in, simplifying. These huge, weird, growthy spikes I could turn into shapes similar to what we already have on Cacturn. The head was a pretty basic shape itself, and it just came down to what direction I wanted to go, whether I go a more creepy aspect or I go a more Pokemon-esque aspect, and getting to play with those designs a little bit. It was fun almost turning this into a dinosaur, and man, I don't know, of all the Pokemon that I've been designing for this type of stuff, once I hit this one, I thought this is a really fun design, and it does fit the Porrico story that we're going with. Speaking of which, if you're not aware, we've been doing an ARG about mutated Pokemon for the last couple of months on the channel, and these ones really fit. So the story that I'm going with is that Porrico has decided that they wanted to focus on the aspect of pre-evolution, or forced pre-evolution, forcing Pokemon to kind of evolve backwards. They do that with a special serum that they've concocted using their secret chemical X that you may have heard about in other videos that we've been doing, as well as a couple other things, all for their grander plan. If you don't follow us on the Discord, you'll know that we have a group there that's been kind of uncovering this mystery as we go. Shared documents. Every Monday, whenever we drop one of these videos, the conversation just explodes with what could be going on, and this is kind of just an extra little add-on to it. While they're going about their plans, the idea of making Pokemon weaker rather than stronger occurred. They started experimenting with different Pokemon who they know are evolutions, and rather than forcing them to evolve a further time like they've done in the past, what about forcing them to evolve back? Wouldn't that be a good marketing strategy for people who want the cute and cuddly design of the Munchlax, but don't necessarily have the room in their home to house a Snorlax? So they began concocting this. Unfortunately, things went a little awry. Rather than getting a pre-evolution, they got a historical pre-evolution. They got something that existed prior to the Pokemon in its final form today. And that's where you get these monstrosities. And so meet Cacterror, the cactus Pokemon. Notice that it's not the Scarecrow Pokemon or anything like that. This has maintained a lot of the features of the initial Cacnea. While it may look more monstrous, it has not adapted to gain that dark type that Cacturn has. It also has a base stat total that's the same as Cacturn's, just with a different typing. Let me know what abilities you think this guy should have down in the comments. For the shiny, I went with the same color scheme that we see with Cacnea and Cacturn, but for size, you'll notice that it is much bigger than what we may be used to the point that it is towering over the player. I think of it a lot similar to a Brachiosaurus, a dinosaur type of Pokemon, especially with that lore that I'm integrating into the ARG, with the fact that these are Pokemon that have a forced pre-evolution, but rather than getting to what they were originally, they have become something different, kind of getting into the code that makes a Pokemon, and playing with it from there. Moving on over, we have a Pokemon that I actually am unsure of what it ends up being. It's the one that you saw in the thumbnail. It appears to be a dinosaur, maybe an early Groudon, I started to think, but the more that I looked at it, actually after finishing the drawing, the more I started to think it looked almost like it was a turkey? Am I wrong? Am I weird? Let me know in the comments. Is this our first turkey Pokemon? And I don't know. Anyway, I had a lot to work with here, so I just hopped right into it with such an exciting prompt. Much like with the Lickitung or Licky Licky design that we did earlier, I had a good starting point. I went with just kind of the base beta model that we had and went from there. I gave it a little bit more aggressive of a stance, kind of like it was leaning forward, preparing for battle. It just struck me as a very competitive and offensive type of Pokemon, so I went with that. I drew inspiration from already existing Pokemon like Tyranitar. That ended up becoming a big inspiration for this Pokemon, and I even played with the idea of calling it Tyrannosaur. But I moved away from that as I continued drawing and realized there's a lot of aspects here that feel like they're fully their own. This isn't a runoff of a previous Pokemon. I mean, if it was, that would have been laid out in the beta write-up, right? Hey, this is the early iteration of blank, but that wasn't the case. So it just became drawing a fun Pokemon, and it was a ton of fun. This is actually a really cool design, and probably one of the few that I'm genuinely upset was scrapped. It's a fun concept with these like spikes coming out of the arms, this fan-like tail, this red like energy point on the chest that really draws your eye in with that red color alongside those grounded browns and that white. It feels like it's a finished Pokemon, and yet we didn't get it. And that's disappointing, but who knows? Maybe we'll have a situation where we get to see it come back later. I mean, that's kind of the issue that we had with Garchomp, right? It appeared in early drafts, but came back later as its own separate Pokemon, more fleshed out. And as I'm watching myself draw this, I am again seeing that turkey. Am I crazy? Am I not? Am I seeing something that's not there? I'm seeing the big fan-like tail. I'm seeing the red goblet, whatever. In the comments, let me know what it's called. The red beard thing on its neck. And then I even see kind of that like barren head, bare of feathers and nothing on it. It almost even has that beak type structure to the beak. I'm all over the place. I'm so sorry. This thing just is throwing me for a loop. Is it a turkey? Is it a dinosaur? Do we have a Kangaskhan situation where it's several things all at once and we're just told that it's inspired by an animal that it vaguely resembles? I don't know, and I think that's what I like about it. It really harkens back to the Pokemon like Kangaskhan, like Nidoking and Nidoqueen, Pokemon that really have no base but just exist. Now, I'm no hyper Gen 1er who says the first gen was the best generation. I've said it time and time again. Gen 2 and 3 were some of my favorite concepts. But Pokemon like this really remind me that you can do a lot with almost no concept, just creating a monster. And so, as Poriko continued their devious experiments on creating life out of nothing and pre-evolving Pokemon, we come up with Dracanon. Dracanon's name comes from the reference that I wish it was canon and dragon. I just feel like it's a dragon type. Look at the thing. It's the burrow Pokemon. I see it almost digging its way underground and kind of having these deep, narrow, and burrowed tunnels that really are the perfect size for it, but other larger Pokemon, if there are any, are going to have a hard time getting through. For its stats, I wanted to give it some grandeur, so I gave it a little bit higher stat amount, and being that this is a Pokemon that fully doesn't exist or never did exist, for the shiny, I went with what I thought was coolest. I'm gonna be 100% honest on that. So it is black and red and silver and white, and that is cool. Very much the Charizard treatment of just, what's the coolest thing? Let's do that. Its size is pretty big. I think a lot of people might say this was an early Groudon, and for that, I wanted to kind of match that size. I don't think it is. I see where some of the similarities are, but I love it just kind of being its own thing that got scrapped, because that means there's opportunity for it to maybe potentially come back. I'm hoping, I'm praying, I got my fingers clasped, my eyes closed, saying please, please, please give us this guy. This is one of my favorite beta designs that we've seen, and one that I genuinely hope we get to see more of. But speaking of disappointment, I have to talk about one of the most disappointing trios I think we've ever gotten in Pokemon. So much potential with the Forces of Nature trio that was just kind of a letdown to me. I mean, I get it, they tried to amp it up by giving them their Therian forms, and I'm sure that there's some backstory to that, but that's just a guy. That's just a guy on a cloud with a tail type thing. And it turns into a lion or a bird or a different kind of man dragon thing. I don't know, it was just always kind of disappointing to me. And so when I was looking at beta designs that I wanted to talk about today, obviously a beta design based around the Forces of Nature trio stuck out to me. What potential could have been. And while I think there are some areas that it could use some potential fixing, I'm no official Pokemon designer. I just do videos on YouTube. Who am I to point at the professionals? But I think that there's a lot of fun that can be had with this design. I know that there have been leaks for other versions. There's like a Landorus leak versus this leak, but this one felt like it was kind of all-encompassing. There's aspects to it that feel like they really match every part of the Forces of Nature trio. I keep almost calling them the Weather Trio because it feels like that fits, but I know that that's wrong because the Weather Trio are perfect little babies and I love them. But this one, it just has so many aspects to it that I thought were cool. The thing that drew me to it most was the shape of those arms. How they're both an amalgam of cloud and twists and turns, while also being just arms. I don't know, very blobby. It feels very kaiju in its design. Maybe that's the reddish skin, maybe that's the horns, maybe that's the cloud head. And I know that these guys are based on ancient gods or kaiju or some form of that. I probably could have looked it up before I started the video, but I didn't, and so here we are with me asking you to let me know down in the comments, what are the Forces of Nature trio based on? Is it just Jin? I don't know. Regardless, there were a lot of elements of this beta that I thought were really interesting. I thought combining the weather forces into one structure was really cool, and it felt very Zeus-like, very Kronos-like, very just overall god-esque, and I wanted to do something with that. It also gave me an opportunity to play with the textures of the various types of wind that we see in this design. There's a sandstorm that it's kind of floating on. There's these dark and thundery clouds to one side, and then this purplish tornado whirlwind on the other with just your basic white fluffy cloud forming the head. A lot of challenges, a lot of concepts, all just within this one character. And a part of me wanted to challenge myself, see if it was as difficult to make this design work as it was for the initial designers. And spoiler alert, it is very, very, very difficult. So yeah, I learned a lot. I played around with the colors and the textures a lot, and it was a lot of fun. I think I took a lot more liberties with this design than I did with the others that we saw today. But overall, it's something that I can say I'm fairly happy with. I think it fits what a Pokemon design is, could be, and should be. But I don't know. It feels, even if it does, like it's one of those ones that's kind of on the outskirt. Everyone in the Discord knows how much that I have just a disdain for Bramblin and Bramblegast, and it's because I feel like they don't fit as Pokemon. They feel just oversimplified, and I feel like this one may be the other side of the spectrum. It may be overly complicated, but still kind of fits the Pokemon vibe, especially when you're looking at something that it's supposed to exemplify with it being this Forces of Nature type of god aspect. It feels really cool. And incorporating this into the Porico lore that we've been playing with the ARG, I think it really fits. The next logical step between making Pokemon, forcing them to evolve, forcing them to pre-evolve, is seeing if you could create a deity. That's kind of the whole purpose here, isn't it? They're looking to create life so that they can challenge Arceus. I mean, for those of you who aren't aware and aren't in the know on what's going on with that ARG, that's kind of what's been building up to at this point. I'm not going to say if it's true or if it's a theory, but it's been discussed. And so, as an amalgam of Tornadus, Thundurus, and Landorus, I thought, why not call this guy Disastrous, the Calamity Pokemon? This one would be dark flying type, really playing on the idea that these are forces of nature, these are calamitous events that happen in the lives of daily humans, just living on Earth. For the total, I went with the same base total for Landorus. And yeah, for the shiny, I did the same type of thing that we see in the patterns of those Pokemon, just kind of lightening the color scheme a little bit. I really wanted it to feel like it fit in with the same themes that we see there, despite the fact that it looks nothing like the Forces of Nature trio, and I like that. It's not just a man on a cloud, it is a cloud that looks like a man. It's several clouds that look like a man, I guess. I don't have a Therian form for it yet. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Maybe if I do another video like this, depending on kind of how this one goes, I'll give it a Therian form, which would be really cool, because that's kind of a whole new design thrown on top of the betas inspired by them. I'd be really pumped to do that. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that cool stuff just to let me know where you stand with that whole process. It is, of course, ARG Day, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a glimpse into the Kostawes region as we push on forward with your first gym leader that you're going to encounter on your track to become a Pokemon League champion. You're going to encounter Aurelia, who is a gym trainer in a gym. Think of the term pumping iron. That's where we get our steel type inspiration. Her name, Aurelia, comes from the term in French meaning gilded or covered in metal. So that's her. When you first encounter her, she's going to have some weaker, smaller Pokemon that are going to grow throughout the series and as you progress throughout your challenge. She's going to start off with an Aron, a Galarian Meowth, and a Clink. All steel type Pokemon that are gonna kind of push you to your limits when you challenge her and your Pokemon are about level maybe 14, 15, about to evolve, and maybe if you grind a little bit more, you might get there, but for the moment, she's gonna be your first challenge. Her Pokemon are going to be powerful, but not so powerful as to make it impossible. That's kind of the motif that I'm going for this early gym. Her job is to test you, see if you truly are cut out to even begin this trial. Maybe she'll have a challenge for you much like the Alola trials, or like we had in Galar, where you had to do a chore in order to challenge her to a gym battle. I don't know, still playing with that concept, but let me know what you think down below. What challenge would a steel type gym leader in a gym have for you? I'm excited to see what you guys come up with. She's one of my favorite gym leaders, and I haven't actually told you all of her Pokemon yet. That's going to be something for just a second here. As I've said, Poriko is a huge proponent of the gyms and of the Pokemon League as a whole, so as is such, they wanted to provide her with a powerful Pokemon. But for the moment, this is Aurelia, your first gym challenge. She's going to be something difficult to get through as she's constantly stretching and prepping for the next battle, almost as if she herself is taking on your Pokemon. But let's get on to her true ace for the gym battle. Since Aurelia is technically an employee of the Pokemon Research Facility, being that she's a gym leader and Poriko signs her paychecks, they wanted to ensure that she was a powerful gym leader. Thus, they gave her one of their quote-unquote no longer necessary experiments. It was believed that this Pokemon was initially created to stop an infestation of a grass-type abomination loose in Poriko, but once it was decided that they no longer needed it for those purposes, it was gifted to her as a powerful ally that she could utilize in her training. It was at one point solely a steel-type Pokemon, but after years of experimentation and time spent kind of moving around its chemistry, it's become something else. This Pokemon that was at one point solely steel type now is poison type, releasing a toxin used to battle Pokemon that are grass type or other types as well. The toxin that it releases creates a frenzied type of atmosphere, probably one of the reasons that it was removed from the experimentation of taking out that grass type Pokemon. Instead of making docile Pokemon, it makes them more frenzied. When battling this Pokemon, yours may no longer listen. They may decide to do attacks that you didn't call for, or just decide to loaf about. Very dangerous in a Pokemon battle, but something that Aurelia feels trainers need to adapt to. She understands that Pokemon are their own independent creatures. It's not about forcing them to do things that they don't want to do, but more so about working with Pokemon in what they believe is right and what you believe is right, and meeting kind of in the middle on that. She understands that Pokemon and trainers have a diverse and storied experience with one another. And so in that way, she's happy to have this Pokemon. It allows that lesson to be taught, whether that be the difficult way or the easy way. And while it may be something that some trainers have difficulty grappling with and getting through their heads, she believes that it allows trainers and Pokemon to build a stronger bond, to build a relationship that's not based solely on do this, now do that, because I'm your trainer and I said so, but because you have a relationship with this Pokemon, because it's your friend. Is that not the point of Pokemon, as she might put it? To build a relationship with them so that you together can be a force for the Pokemon League? Now, if you're a person who already doesn't trust their Pokemon, you're going to have a very difficult time in this challenge. But if you're someone who understands things the same way that she does and that Pokemon are meant to be companions, then this should be a walk in the park. Shouldn't it? I mean, shouldn't it? Why doesn't it feel like a walk in the park? Why does it still feel like a trial? And so I want to introduce you to Segmant. Segmant is the toxic ant Pokemon for the shiny. It's based on what the original Pokemon may have been. Maybe you have a clue. Maybe you believe you know what it is. I'm curious. It is Steel and Poison type with the ability Irritate. Like I said before, the ability Irritate makes it so that there is a chance that a Pokemon may just not listen to you as it falls under the effects of these deadly spores that this Pokemon emits. Like I said, it may at one point have been fully Steel type, but it has been integrated with a secondary type thanks to Poriko, all working to make Pokemon better and more viable for sale, for use all over the world. So big thank you to Poriko for doing this for us. We appreciate you so much. In fact, if you are a Poriko supporter, you can buy their merch over at my site, which is going to be down in the description below, where you can get Poriko hats and Poriko shirts, and that's about it right now. More Poriko stuff coming in the future, as well as a couple other lines for holiday seasons coming up about our Five Nights at Freddy's, about our Amazing Digital Circus, all that good stuff. But for the moment, this is Segmant. The name comes from its ability to separate its parts, which are kind of just held together at this point by those spores. Very kooky, very spooky, very Halloween vibe, very demure. So yeah. Before we fully wrap up today, I want to let you know there's a challenge going on every week. I'm dropping a new prompt over on our Discord, and the artists over there are doing a fantastic job making those come to life. So I wanted to showcase some of those here today with our prompt amalgam for the week. First up, Evan the Frosty did an amazing job on this Reggie amalgam, followed by a stunning Dracopult by Snack. And Obsidian Fox giving us this amazing 2-stage line. Go ahead and pause and read up on that. It's amazing stuff. JT went in with this 3-stage line based on a couple different types of equipment and things, and it's a really cool concept. You gotta read through it here. Esteban Prox threw it away with the shading and lighting of this metal guy, and I love that so much. And Wendigo King gave us this really cool group of Pokemon. Sunny D Not the Drink threw together some Pokemon for this amalgam, as well as this insect type by Lavender Q. As long as Ollie's making Eevees, they'll always be my favorite Pokemon. Ozone Scribbles gave us this great 3-stage that brings together a couple of our different metal type Pokemon. Really cool concept brought to life here. Read up on those in video when you get the chance. Liam brought together one Pokemon from each gen in this monstrosity, while Wonderlaney, who streams, check them out, did this 2-stage. Bugcatcher Key, whose name I'm sure I got wrong, gave us both of these bug types, which are just phenomenal. And I have to hand it to Kirby the Frog for this superb design. Very cool. Regibert gave us the Goodest Boy, and Crimbo threw all of our trait evolutions together into this awesome thing. Today was a little bit different of a video, just with those leaks coming out. I wanted to incorporate those into the Poriko story as well, and I think they fit pretty seamlessly. You know where the Discord is, you know where my Ko-fi and Patreon and everything are down in the description below. Don't forget to pick up some Poriko merch. And with all that said, I guess it sounds like you know where to find me. So I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.